Hello, my Italian food fanatics. Well, you saw me plate it up. Today we're going to make Saffron Risotto. It's a risotto. Well, all risottos are typically from the north, but adding saffron is a Lombardy thing. Typically in Milan, you'll see this a lot. But it adds a flavor to the risotto that is unlike any other. Saffron's one of my favorite things on earth, and we're going to learn how to use it a little bit. We're going to learn how to make the risotto. We're going to use a little bit of butter. We're going to use some onions, the rice itself, a little bit of white wine, and some chicken stock. And then we're going to finish it off, of course, with a little bit of Parmesan cheese. And we're going to add in our chicken broth just to thin it out a little bit and get it so it's just perfectly creamy and al dente. And of course, in there is going to be the saffron that's going to add that je ne sais quoi, that saffron flavor and color that you can't get with anything else on earth. It is one of those beautiful things like foie gras, a really fine champagne, beluga malasol, caviar, things like that. It's on that level. White tartufo bianco, white truffles, tartufo nero, the black truffles. It's in that zone. It's one of these things that has grown on the earth that somebody figured out how to use it, and it's just heavenly. So, without any further ado, wait a minute. Hold on. Stop the presses. Thumbs up, like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment down below of what you think. All right? I really appreciate it. Tell your friends if they're Italian food fanatics, let them know about my channel. And I'd like to get some more subscribers. I love talking with you. I love interacting with you. I answer all of the posts, and I hope to continue to do so. Thank you very much. And now let's get in the kitchen and make a risotto with saffron. All right, let's get started making our risotto with saffron, or risotto Milanese, if you want to call it that. We have some chicken stock. We have carnaroli rice. You should only use carnaroli, not anything else. We have, of course, saffron. You should buy Iranian or Persian saffron. That is the best saffron in the world. Half an onion. We have some butter, some white wine, and of course, to finish off, a little Parmigiano Reggiano. So we need to cut the onion very, very fine. We need to rinse the rice, okay, always. I don't care how clean it is, you need to rinse it off, wash off the little bit of the starch that's on the outside, and I think we're good to go with everything else. All right, we'll do that and come back. All right, let's start with the risotto. First, what we want to do is take our chicken stock, and we want to bring it to a simmer, and we want to keep it warm, because we're going to be incorporating it into the rice, and it needs to be hot as it's added into the rice. We don't want to cool the rice down and then bring it back up to temperature. We want the stock to already be hot, and we're going to add that in about 2 to 3 phases. Actually, 3 is ideal, is classical. So we'll be back when this is at a simmer. All right, now that our stock is coming up to temperature, we're going to add a little bit of butter into a pan or to a sauce pot here, which is what we're going to make the risotto in. When that melts, we'll add our onions. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add them now as the butter melts and the water, or pardon me, and as the butter melts and the pot comes up to temperature. We'll stir that around. We'll add a little bit of salt. And we'll be back. We're going to cook this for about 3 to 5 minutes until the onions soften. And then we're going to add our rice and toast it. And I'll be back for that in a moment. As you can see, I've minced the onion very, very finely. And that's exactly what we want. In fact, I'm going to turn down the heat a little bit. You don't want to do this on very high heat. It needs to be kind of a medium heat so that the onions get softened, but they don't brown. All right, you want to kind of sweat them. So here we go. Be back in a moment. All right, now that our onions have softened up, we're going to add our rice in. Now this instantly cools down So I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit, and we're going to toast this. I'm going to do it until the edges of the rice become a little bit translucent. And then we're going to add in our wine and our saffron. A lot of people add saffron at this point, but the saffron should not go in right now. And the reason for that is because saffron is better, it's a water-soluble item, and it doesn't really do well here with fat or with oil, or fat as in the butter. So we add saffron in when we add the wine. We'll cook everything down, and then we'll begin to add our broth. Be back in a moment. All right, now that we have toasted the rice and the edges have become translucent, we're going to add in that saffron now. And the smell of saffron is one of the most beautiful in the world. I love saffron. And we'll add in our wine. And that's exactly what you want to hear. We'll crank up the temperature, and we're going to cook this until the wine is, part of it's going to be absorbed, of course, by the rice, and the rest is going to evaporate. I'll be back in just a moment. All right, you can see that the wine has evaporated, and look how creamy this rice is becoming already. Now we're going to add some broth, and we're going to continue to cook it until the broth is absorbed. And you stir occasionally. You don't need to constantly stir at this point. So we're going to start with a reasonable amount of broth, bring it up to a boil, which should happen pretty quickly because the broth is already at temperature. And then the rice will absorb this, release its starches into the water. It'll get thicker and more creamy, and then we will add the rest of the broth and continue cooking. I'll be back when we do that. So now I've switched to a wooden spoon, and you can see how the risotto is becoming creamier as the broth is being absorbed into the rice grains. We stir occasionally. Now, a lot of people say to me, why do you keep the saffron strands so big? Why don't you crush them in a mortar and pestle? I like to have the strands like that. It's kind of like having the vanilla beans in ice cream. They're very, very fine little black pieces. Some people find that to be crude. I find that to be an indicator that you're using real vanilla. And this is also an indicator of there's actual saffron in here. I don't mind it at all, even though on like a 3 Michelin star level, we would do things a little bit differently. We probably infuse the broth with the saffron and then add it in so that there would be no strands like that. But I like the strands, so we keep them in. Okay, as you can see, the water or the stock has been absorbed by the risotto, and now we are going to add more and bring this up to temperature, and we need to stir a little bit more frequently now, because what we're doing is coaxing the starch out of the risotto and making it creamy, yet we're going to stop at the al dente texture. Now that is something that I cannot explain to you for whatever reason. I think people have been trying to do it for decades, but until you actually taste it, for example, in Italy, you're not going to understand, and at a good place. I've had plenty of risottos in Italy that are subpar. So you have to go to some place that's really, really good, that is famous for making risotto. You taste it there, and then you'll understand. So it should have a little bit of a chew to it, as opposed to being soft like what we're used to in the West eating rice. So we continue to stir, and when it's absorbed, we add more liquid to it. until it's al dente. Okay, you can see that the risotto is getting really, really thick and creamy. We're going to add another ladleful of broth and continue stirring. And then we're going to taste, and we are almost at the end and ready to eat. Be back in a second. Well, you know what? Let me add this for you so you can see. There we go. And that's going to be our last addition of broth. It's typical. It's classic to add it in 3 steps. All right, we'll continue to cook and I'll be back. All right, now that that 3rd addition of broth has been absorbed, look how creamy and nice the rice is. We're going to give it a little bit of a taste. And it is literally almost done. It's still a little firm in the center, which is perfect. We're going to take it off the heat and we're going to let it rest covered for 5 minutes. Be back. While our risotto is resting, we'll now grate that Parmesan cheese. All right, our rice has rested and it's still beautifully creamy. Needs a little bit more liquid, but first, before we do that, we're going to adjust the consistency. We're going to put in our cheese and mix that around. Of course, that's going to make it seize up a little bit. But that's all right. Again, like I said, we're going to adjust the consistency with the remaining broth that we have with our stock. So if we add in a little bit more, just a little bit, you don't want too much. Remember, the operative word is creamy. So it's still not enough. Add a little bit more broth. Mix it in really, really good. Still not enough. It's going to be a little bit more. You notice how it was a little bit looser now. It's got to get a little bit looser than that. See how it's slowly, it's still not loose enough. I'll pour in, not the rest of it, but just a little bit more. We don't want it to be too loose. And that looks just about right. Yes, literally perfect. Now, we taste, and because we added the Parmesan cheese, that's the reason why I haven't added any salt, is because it could end up too salty. Now that's perfectly creamy and nice. It does need some salt, so we'll add some in there. You know me, I don't like cooking with pepper. I don't believe that pepper belongs here, for the most part. I mean, if you like pepper, you eat pepper with it. You can add pepper. I'm not going to do that. Look, their saffron taste. I didn't add a lot of saffron, but it's a golden enough color. It's beautiful. Let me taste again. That little bit of salt made all the difference. I'm going to add in just a little bit more broth. And that's the consistency that we're looking for. That's perfect. All right, let's dish it up. All right, my Italian food fanatics, now it's the moment of truth. Got the risotto. It's time to taste. That is perfectly done. I put the parsley there for aesthetic purposes. Normally I wouldn't add parsley because it's just perfect the way that it is. That Parmesan adds a richness and a depth. The rice has given up its starch. It's very, very creamy, yet when you bite into the individual rice grains, they still have a little bit of a chew to them, which is the perfect al dente consistency that you want. And of course, I've got to mention the saffron. Saffron is one of my favorite things in the entire world, next to caviar, foie gras, champagne, and the company of a lady. And so I love saffron. And I'd mentioned it before, why I kept the strands in there. But wow, this is just out of this world. Now you can make risottos with all kinds of different things, with mushrooms, even plain, with just some white wine that's reduced down in there and some Parmesan cheese. It tastes phenomenal. You got to use only carnaroli rice, not anything else. That's the true risotto. I don't care what anybody tells you. That's the bottom line. But wow, what a plate. Oh, by the way, before I forget, please hit the thumbs up button, like, subscribe, share with your friends, and leave a comment. I've got that thing memorized now, don't I? After almost, a little over 50 videos. Really good. Try this. It's going to take some trial and error on your part. Buy the rice. Look at the video a couple, 3 times. It's not that difficult to do. Pay attention to consistency. That's the most important thing. You have to get that rice consistency down. In fact, I could have even added more broth and thinned it out even more than I did, because if we were to eat it immediately, it would have been fine. But because I'm filming and doing things like this, sometimes it seizes up a little bit. So if it's going to sit around at the house before the family comes to eat, make sure it's a little more runny than at the perfect time when you set it out. And that way the starches will release. It will thicken up just a little bit and be absolutely perfect. If you're used to eating other types of rice, for example, Middle Eastern rice, or Japanese rice, Chinese rice, any of these rices, jasmine rice from Thailand and things like that, this is a completely different program. It's a creaminess, not a light fluffiness, and not a stickiness either, like it is with East Asian or Japanese or sushi rice. Sushi rice is sticky. Rice from the Middle East is very fluffy. It's a long grain rice, completely different way of cooking, completely different type of a rice. So you have to get kind of used to this if you're not used to it. People from the Middle East won't like this type of rice because of its consistency. It's not what they mentally associate with rice. All right, so you have to think of it as its own thing and not as rice, as a generic rice. It's not. It's not at all. And of course, the addition of saffron is a soigné addition that is done in the north. And of course, we don't use olive oil with this. We use butter and risotto. That's a northern. It's a northern dish anyway. So please go out, get yourself some rice, practice a little bit, and you'll have something under your belt that you can serve with any meal. This is a meal on its own. I've had it with cuttlefish. I've had it with all kinds of different accoutrements as an entree in Italy. So, you know how now it's an entree. It's not just a side dish. It could be a complete lunch with a little salad on the side. How sweet it is. Anyway, until we meet each other again, thanks for your time. Thanks for your eyeballs. Thanks for your attention. I really, really appreciate it. Bye-bye.